and I will be your host for the evening. We will open tonight's event with a recitation of Surah Fatiha by Brother Anis.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
Stop right there for that beautiful recitation. I'd like to thank everyone here tonight for joining Loyola MSA's September lecture series given by Mufti Hussain Kamani. Mufti Hussain Kamani was born and raised in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. His journey to pursue sacred Islamic knowledge began at age 6. By the age of 9, he was able to complete the memorization of the Holy Quran. To further advance his study of Islamic sciences, he later traveled to the United Kingdoms and pursued formal Islamic authorization for 7 years. For 7 years, Mufti Kamani studied a rigorous curriculum covering Arabic language and literature, Islamic jurisprudence, tafsir of the Holy Quran, hadith, Islamic philosophy, and aqidah. Afterwards, he was selected for a postgraduate level course in Islamic law and legal verdict, which he completed within 2 years. He later earned his graduate degrees in business management from the University of Coventry in the UK. Mufti Kamani currently resides in Chicago, Illinois, with his family, where he has served as an imam for 6 years. He also serves as the instructor of the Kalam Institute, where his class, Prophetic Code, has been studied by thousands. By the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is the co-founder of Kamani Online, an internationally recognized clothing brand for men's designer wear. During his pastime, he also enjoys jiu-jitsu. Tonight, we are blessed to have Mufti Hussain Kamani to help us explore issues surrounding our identity as Muslims, what it means to be a Muslim college student, our place in Muslims in a global culture, and Islam as our faith and our identity. After the lecture, we will have a short Q&A session. So without further ado, please help me welcome Mufti Hussain Kamani.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على سيد الرسل وخاتم الانبياء وعلى اله الازكياء واصحابه الاتقياء اما بعد فاعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اليوم اكملت لكم دينكم واتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الاسلام دينا صدق الله العظيم. So today's subject, inshallah, the topic of today's discussion is the Muslim identity, establishing an Islamic identity. This topic is a very interesting one because when I usually attend a gathering where the Islamic identity is being discussed, it's usually from a defensive standpoint, where we're under attack and now we need to establish our identity. When the reality is that under this discussion, usually we make it sound as if culture is constantly attacking our identity. And then as the discussion goes further into it, we create this line between religion and culture, and what we end up leaving the gathering with is either you have to choose religion or culture, you can't have both. So this is usually the discussion or the theme of discussion that are covered in the topic of Islamic identity. But to be honest with you, I differ from this approach. And I wanted to first of all talk about what is an Islamic identity. Then from there we can talk about how to reconcile between culture and Islam, and then establish our identity. So the first thing that we have to realize is that identity is something that develops internally within a person. So establishing your identity isn't necessarily about waving a flag or putting on a particular garment or growing out a beard, or putting a hijab around your head, that's maybe a resemblance of your identity, but it's not your identity completely. Your identity is something that develops internally. A person came to a sheikh and asked him, "Sheikh, how can I focus in my prayer?" Very beautiful question. He said, "How do I learn to focus in my prayer?" So the sheikh said to him that before ibadah you need to have muhabba, before muhabba you need to have ma'rifah. These are 3 Arabic words. So he said ibadah is preceded by muhabba, muhabba is preceded by ma'rifah. If you have these 3 things properly, in the correct order, then your worship will be flawless. You'll enjoy it to bits. Now what do these 3 words actually mean? So what he said was that in order for your worship to actually be worship, and this goes to not only with salah, any act of worship. This could even be the beard example, or the hijab example, or the salah example, or reading the Quran example. These things will only be spiritually uplifting you if you have the 2 steps that precede it. And what are the two steps that precede it? The step before it is called muhabba, love. You have to learn to love the action, learn to love the result, and learn to love the one who you're doing it for. Who am I doing it for? So when I'm growing my beard out, or when I'm wearing my hijab, I'm doing it because of my absolute love for Allah and the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. They wanted me to do it, and they would be happy if I followed my deen, or if I read the Quran, or if I prayed my salah, and out of my love for the one who's instructing me, I will fulfill their commandment. It's kind of like a child listening to their parent. Their base of listening to their parent is love. It's because they love their parent so much, that's why they listen to their parent. And before you love someone, though, you have to first know that person, the idea of ma'rifah. That's what the Prophet ﷺ, in the context of marriage, a sahabi came to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "O Messenger of Allah, I'm about to get married." The Prophet ﷺ said, "Where's the girl from?" He said, "Oh, she's from one of the Ansar, one of the girls from Medina Munawwara." The Prophet ﷺ said, "Well, then you should go and see her first." So he was shocked, like, what? Before marriage, seeing a girl, that sounds wrong. I mean, you want me to have an intimate meeting with her? So the Prophet ﷺ said, "No, you need to go and see her, and not just look at her, but you need to look at her and make sure you're satisfied with her." So then he asked the Messenger of Allah, "Why all of this?" The Prophet ﷺ said, "Because there's something special about the eyes of the women of Ansar. Some people, they like it, some people, they don't like it. Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. You need to go see the girl before you marry her." So getting to know the person is also a process. So we call it ma'rifah. That's why the revelation of Makkah Mukarramah focuses on ma'rifah. It focuses on introducing people to who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So this whole idea of Islamic identity comes way later on, and we can talk about it later on, but the first thing we need to talk about is getting to know what is Islam, right? Getting to know why am I even establishing this identity. So I can sit here and say that I'm attending a lecture, but why am I attending this lecture? I can say as a Muslim, I need to fast in Ramadan, but the question will be, why do you need to fast in Ramadan? Now one of the issues that I have, and I'm going to bring this up right now before we move any forward, is that when we talk about identities, first of all, we talk about it from a global standpoint, and from interfaith, right? And then with an intrafaith, from both standpoints, okay? So when you talk about Islamic identity in comparison to someone who's non-Muslim, you have a Christian there, you have a Buddhist there, a Hindu there. So when you compare the Muslim with the person who's not a Muslim, we end up establishing our identity based off a few things. So some of the examples I gave earlier: who wears a turban, who doesn't wear a turban, who has a beard, who doesn't have a beard, who has a hijab, who doesn't have a hijab. So these things become, points that we establish between a Muslim and a non-Muslim. Now, the second thing is intra-faith, within the Muslims themselves. So now there's this idea between some Muslims and other Muslims, who is more religious and who's less religious. So the way people end up judging who is more religious and who's less religious is by, once again, pointing out these few things. Who wears hijab, who doesn't wear hijab. The one who wears hijab, mashallah, is very pious. The one who doesn't has no religion at all. And this is what we call being judgmental. So identity sometimes can become a source of ego, and you have to watch out for that. Especially when you end up identifying identity as something external, and you don't realize that there's actually an internal aspect of identity. I'll share with you an example where I got hit with a slap of reality in Chicago itself. The Masjid al-Lincoln in Peterson, down the street from here. I was imam there for 6 years. It was the month of Ramadan, 27th night, we had the Khatm al-Quran. After the Khatm al-Quran, the completion of the Quran, a large group of people came for the dua, like in all masajid. After I finished the prayer off, I was standing there greeting people. People were coming forward and congratulating us at the recitation of the Quran, the completion of it. One young man came and he said, "Sheikh, I need to talk to you." So I said to him, look bro, I'm a little busy right now, because there's a lot of people here that I need to greet. They've come especially for this gathering. Let me meet everyone. After I'm done, just wait in that corner, I promise I'll come to you. Now, I was greeting everyone. There were so many people that by the time I got there, it was 2 a.m. at night, right? And everyone was kind of like resting out right now. Everyone was lying down. And I saw that guy there, and I went up to him and I said, bro, I'm so sorry. He said, Sheikh, not a problem. So I said, what's wrong? So he said, Sheikh, I made a very big mistake. And I looked at this kid, young man, right? Maybe like in his 20s, just about 20s. And he has his hair all spiked up, has a chain around his neck, mashallah. He has a bracelet around his wrist, and his jeans are ripped across his knees. And I'm looking at this guy, and Allah protect me, Allah forgive me. I should have judging this guy. I was thinking to myself, maybe in a second he's going to tell me about how he robbed someone. Maybe he's going to tell me about how he just drank alcohol, or maybe he did something really crazy that he's going to tell me about. Maybe he just killed someone or something, right? I'm sitting here thinking of all the sins that are associated with that particular image within the Muslim community. And this young man says to me, Sheikh, I've committed a sin that I fear Allah will never forgive me for. And I said, what happened? And he keeps crying and crying. So I said, look, you need to relax and tell me what happened. We'll figure out how to get around the issue. So he says to me, last night was the first time in 3 years I missed the Hajj Salah. I fear Allah is angry with me now. And I looked at this guy and I said, what? The Hajj of you? And I'm looking around and all these other malams are sleeping. Right? All these other guys with these big, nice, big beards, mashallah, 2 o'clock at night are sleeping. And I'm almost sure, again, I'm being judgmental here again, okay? That people are, how many people wake up for the Hajj Salah in our community? That's something that we've heard about. We've read it in the hadith books. We've discussed this discussion under voluntary acts that the Hajj, the late night prayer is something beautiful. And this man is telling me, this young guy is telling me that in 3 years I haven't missed my Hajj Salah. And I'm looking at this guy and I'm thinking, wow. Really, just wow. I delivered a seminar once in California. It was in San Jose. And after the seminar was over, there was a lady sitting in the front. She came to the front, average lady, she came to the front. She actually had Mongol blood in her. She was from the Tatar, the Tataris, right? She had her lineage linking back to them. So she came to the front and said to me, Sheikh, I've committed a sin that is so grave that I fear that Allah will never forgive me. I said, what did you do? Right? She said, I listen to music all my life. And I'm thinking to myself, what? Like that's something that people do all the time, right? But this person in their heart, because it's something that they heard from someone, or they were taught as growing up that this is something not to do, they're so afraid. So when I look at it, I think to myself, subhanAllah, there are certain people who maybe by their physical features, externally they haven't established the identity that you and I have held them accountable to, but internally they've developed. And they actually know why they're doing things. Sometimes when I'm sitting in a gathering, and the adhan is called, and people throw their hijab on. You guys have seen that, right? When the adhan is being called, people throw their hijab on. When the Quran is being recited, especially with our elders, those who are our parents or our grandparents, they probably won't wear the hijab, but when salah time goes on, they'll throw the hijab on. Or when they're reading Quran, they'll throw the hijab on. Or even with the guys, you'll notice that some uncles that when they're listening to the Quran or the adhan goes on, they'll cover their head or they'll wear something more appropriate. When I was once at a gathering, and there was a sheikh that was speaking before me, and he kind of mocked that idea. He was saying that he called them convertible hijabis, and how these guys were part-time Muslims. You guys have heard these jokes before, right? So my turn came, I said to the brother, look, the sisters or the brothers who adopt the sunnah to the higher level for their entire day, I really respect it. That's something that I would advocate and I would love, that every person follows every sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And I'm not talking about fard here, or what's mandatory, what's not. I'm just talking about the sunnah. We all know that it was a sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to grow his beard out. Now, whether that's fard or not, that's another discussion for another day. So I'm not talking about that, okay, for a second. Try to hear me out. So I said, look, the thing here is that those who do it full time, they are commendable. They should be respected, and maybe, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them a reward that will be very great. But even those brothers and sisters who decide to be respectful at the time of when the Quran is being recited or when the adhan is being given, it shows something special about them too. It shows something very special about them. What does it show? Now sometimes a person can do an act of ibadah because they've adopted that act of ibadah culturally. You guys understand that? Yes or no? Okay, I'll explain to you. So, for example, me wearing these gowns, I've always worn a thobe. I've never ever worn anything other than that growing up. Just as a child, maybe when I was in first grade, second grade, third grade, I may have worn, just average clothes. But then when I went to Islamic schools, this is what the uniform was, and I always wore this. So for me to leave a particular garment that may be inappropriate and come to this garment or come to a garment that's more appropriate, I don't know what that struggle actually is. You guys understand that? I don't know what that struggle means. The reason is because I've never gone through that in my life. Many of us have never drank alcohol. So because we never drank alcohol, what does it mean to sacrifice alcohol? We actually have no idea at all. It's something that we're unaware of. Now, the other thing is that some of us, our religion isn't really religion in its true format. It's actually a religion that is that's mixed with culture. That may be religion, but the reason why we follow that religion is because it's culture. So I'll give you an example. Okay, at the time of marriage, this is a good example. At the time of marriage, the girl will get married if her father is by her side. Many cultures they share the same concept. Even in the Western culture, it's a common thing. The best man, the father, the older brother, some male representative will be there that will be there to be for that person, that will be there as a spokesman for that person. So, in reality, this is a concept in Islam called a wali, that the male guardian for the female will be there to represent her in the gathering of the nikah. Now, many times, the things that we follow in our marriages, the traditions that we follow in our marriages, they may be Islamic, but the reason why we actually do them is because culture is what taught us these things, not Islam is what taught us these things. So another example for you to understand is that many of us have been praying salah our entire lives, yes or no? Yes or no? Like, on and off, we've been praying our entire lives. So when we pray our salah, we all tie our hands. Someone may tie them here, someone may tie them here, someone may tie them here. We agree? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Can anyone in this gathering raise their hand and tell me the hadith of why you tie your hands here, or here, or here? I mean, there has to be a hadith, right? Would you guys agree there's at least one? Who thinks there's more than one? There's like a bunch of them, okay? Anyway, wherever you tie your hands, there's a bunch of hadith. If you think there's only one, there's a problem. There's a lot of them, maybe hundreds of them, okay? But now who in this gathering can actually tell me the hadith behind wearing the hat? Or the hadith behind wearing the hijab? Or the hadith behind the virtue of any particular act? Now, are we being rewarded for these things? We definitely are. Whether we know the hadith or not, we're still being rewarded for them. The point that I'm making is that we end up adopting these things because this is what culture taught us. There was a great scholar from the subcontinent. He said that people perceive religion based in there are 4 different categories of people on how they perceive religion. So he used these 4 words, they're Persian words. They commonly shared in Urdu and Arabic as well. He calls it Deen Mizaji, Liwaji, Shari'i, and Haqiqi. The 4 things, okay? Deen Mizaji, Liwaji, Shari'i, and Haqiqi. Deen Mizaji is what he says is that people, they perceive religion based off their own whims and desires, what they want religion to be. So when they want religion to be something, they'll find an argument to make religion bend in that direction so that way religion can accommodate them. You guys understand that? So they're not looking for what Allah wants, they're looking for what they want. I had a young man who came to me. He invited me over to his house for iftar one day, some time back. And I went to his house, very beautiful guy. Honestly, such a charm, amazing guy. He invited me to his house, we had a lot of food, good time. We were walking back to the masjid for Tarawih prayer, and on the way there I smelled something. I said, that doesn't smell right. And if anyone's ever gone to college, you know what weed smells like, okay? So I said, something's not right here. So I looked at him and I said, did you smoke something? He said, Sheikh, why should I hide it from you? Every day on the way to Tarawih prayer, I smoke a joint. I said, SubhanAllah. Why would you do that? He said, it helps me focus in my Tarawih prayer. You guys understand? So that's a very interesting perspective. Very interesting. So I said to him that, don't you think that would be wrong? Like, don't you think that there are so many things that are wrong with that action? Didn't one of them decide to stop you from doing it? He's a buddy of mine. He said to me, Sheikh, I thought to myself that even though some scholars have said it's not good, but there's a greater benefit here. I said, what's the greater benefit? He said, I can focus on my Tarawih prayer. So what happens here is that Shaitan, he makes it, and I sat down, I talked with him, he's a great guy, things got cleared up, and alhamdulillah, he stopped that for the remaining 3 days of Tarawih that were left. Now, Shaitan, what he does is that he sees what you want, and then he ends up allowing you to justify it, right? and you end up using the Quran and the Sunnah to justify it. That's the craziest thing. Okay? Now you're thinking, how can a person use the Quran and Sunnah to justify haram? Isn't that interesting? Yes or no? That's interesting, right? You know, there were people during the life of Ali radiallahu anhu. You guys have all heard of Ali radiallahu anhu, who was the fourth Khalifa, and also the son-in-law of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A very great companion, one of the earliest to accept Islam. So, Ali radiallahu anhu, during his Khilafah, there were a group of people who kind of came out against him. They waged war against Ali radiallahu anhu. Okay? And the reason was because the Khalifa before him was who? Anyone know? Uthman. And what happened to Uthman radiallahu anhu? He was murdered. And they said to Ali radiallahu anhu, we want you to take revenge. So Ali radiallahu anhu said, well, I will take revenge. I'm going to take it a little easy. When the things settle down, when everything calms down a little bit, I will find the people one by one and I will deal with them. They insisted in saying, no, no, no. The Quran says a life for a life, and unless you don't take a life for his life, that means you're violating the Quran, which means that you're no longer worthy of being the Khalifa, which means that if you continue to hold that position, we will wage war against you. You guys understand that? So Ali radiallahu anhu said, whoa, calm down. What are you guys talking about? All this means. So then they quoted the ayah of the Quran, إِنِ الْحُكْمُ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ. That was their proof and their argument against Ali radiallahu anhu. Which means the command only belongs to Allah. Meaning whatever Allah says, you have to do it. Any other rule, any other government in the world doesn't matter at all. Squat. Okay? So as soon as they read this ayah, Ali radiallahu anhu, he said something very beautiful. He said, كَلِمَةُ حَقٍّ أُرِيدَ بِهَا الْبَاطِلِ. He said, the verse that you're quoting is definitely in the Quran. But you're taking the wrong meaning out of it. You're twisting it. And you're twisting it to serve you, when in reality, that's not what this verse actually means. This verse has another context. It has another meaning altogether. So people, they can easily pull verses, and they allow those verses to accommodate them. You know? So for example, very common scenario. Mother and father were told their children that I don't want you practicing upon this particular aspect of the deen, whatever it may be. Now, the child tells their mom and dad, Mom, Dad, this is the sunnah, I want to act upon it. So the mom and dad will always quote which verse? Respect your parents. And which hadith? Mom will say, paradise lies under the feet of your mother. And now, when you look at the hadith, is the hadith right or wrong? The hadith is there. But the hadith is being quoted out of context. Everything has a context. So this is the first group of people the Sheikh said, he calls them deen and mizaji. These are people whose religion is based off their whims and desires. And these people are very far from understanding religion, because the idea behind revelation is to submit yourself to it, not to make revelation submit itself to you. This is a principle, okay? Anytime you find yourself making revelation submit to you, you've missed the point altogether. The idea behind revelation is that you submit to it. When something comes in the Quran, سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. We listen to it, we obey it. As for the Jewish community during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when revelation would come down, they would say, سَمِعْنَا وَعَصَيْنَا. That we listen to it, but we disobey it, because it doesn't match what we want in life. The second group of people, he calls them Dina Riwaji. Riwaj means a culture. They're cultural Muslims. So whatever they've adopted, whatever they practice, it's all culture. So for example, I remember growing up, my mom used to always tell me that after you're done praying salah, what do you do with the musalla? You fold it. You guys remember that, right? And if you don't fold it, Shaitan's going to pray. And I always thought to myself, I know many of you guys have thought of this too. When I was a kid, I always thought to myself, if Shaitan prays, isn't it all over? Like, are we all supposed to go to Jannah? No more sinning, no more temptations. I was like, Mom, why did I leave it open? If Shaitan prays, this is really going to work. Right? I figured it out. So cultural, when you look at it, it makes no sense at all. But it's a cultural thing, something that was adopted culturally. Now, when you search back, why they would do this culturally, this is not practiced in all parts of the world. This is practiced in this culture is specific to certain parts of the world. So there are two, now, I know I'm going to go a little tangent here, but I'll just discuss it anyway. Anyone know why they used to fold their prayer mats after prayer? We all laugh at it, but why did they actually do it? They weren't fools. They weren't just, it's not like someone woke up one day and was having pie and said, let's just fold the prayer mat from now on. I mean, there had to be a reason, yes?
Wasn't it like the jinns would come and pray there?
Oh, nice. Jinns. I haven't heard that one before. That's cool. We should keep it open again then, right? Some dawah to the jinns. Anyone else? You think about it for a second. Why would someone fold the musalla? Yes?
To not get it dirty? I don't know, just
okay, to not get it dirty. Interesting. Now, one of the things the scholars have written, that one of the reasons why people used to fold the musalla, they're both actually based around that same point, to not get it dirty. One was because when people would pray, many masajid will actually not have rugs in them. So every person would bring their own personal prayer rug. And after salah was over, when people are exiting the masjid, where are they going to step? The place where you're going to do sajda. And if they're going to step where you're doing sajda, it's not clean, it's not nice. You know, people have things on their feet that you don't want being where you're going to put your forehead down. It can cause a smell there, it can cause a stench to go there. Another thing that was very common, another thing scholars have written, the reason why they used to do this is because their structures were not solid like we have. You know, right now we have a solid structure. We can't hear anything outside, no one can hear what's going on inside. Because their structures were very weak, when the wind would blow, the sand and dust would come and settle down on the places they would do sajda. And if they were down there, it would make their sajda very difficult for them. So after they were done, they would immediately fold that part away, so that way when they did make contact with that part, again, it's something to do with cleaning, being clean. And then because it went from one generation to another generation, it became a part of it. So there are tons of examples of things that were adopted into religion because of culture. So as long as religion and culture go great, alhamdulillah. But the big question comes, what happens when religion and culture clash? What happens then? That's the interesting part. How does a person deal when religion and culture clashes? Your culture teaches you something, okay? So for example, religion teaches us that between genders, there should be an idea of segregation. It's something a part of our deen. But when we come to culture, you know, culture living in the West, growing up here, there is no concept of segregation. There's no concept of it at all. Today I was at the gym. Something really weird happened, okay? So I was at the gym and my trainer was there, and I don't know why. There's something about guys. For some reason, every other day, someone mentioned something about 4 marriages, right? So he said something about 4 nikah, and I said, bro, you know what? I'm going to go work out right now. I don't want to talk about this right now, right? Because we're also in a gym, and there's so many people there. There's like a lot of non-Muslims there, and if they don't hear the full conversation and understand everything, they can get very confused. So I said, you know what? I'm going to come back. I'm going to go hit up a few reps, right? So now, what I feared most is exactly what happened. There was a lady sitting there. She said, I heard something about 4 marriages. I was like, oh my goodness. So my buddy, I'm listening to him while I'm lifting on the other side. He says, yeah, it's a sunnah. Oh my God, here we go. Right? So she says, so guys can get married multiple times? So he's like, it's a sunnah. Right? I was like, oh my God, here we go, right? Then she says, well, can I get married multiple times? Interesting question, right? Really interesting question, right? And when she asked that question, he goes to me, Mufti, I need you over here. I said, no, you caused that problem. You deal with it. Don't call me over right now. I got to go to Loyola. I got to get out of here quickly and drive over there. Otherwise, I'm going to be late for that lecture, right? That's another discussion. I'm not going to talk about it, okay? Multiple marriages. But there's this idea of, we were talking about religion and culture. When religion and culture clash, how do you deal with it, okay? And I was giving you the example of segregation, okay? So now we live in a society where it's something that's viewed as absolutely normal for guys and girls to sit together, for whatever purpose it is, to sit together and, you know, to socialize, casually socialize. It's okay. Now, what does Islam say about this? Is Islam okay with that, or does Islam have some restrictions to put around it? So now I'm going to quickly touch on this because you guys are in college right now, and this is a very important part of your life. You're going to be here for the next few years, if you haven't been here already for a few years. It's very important to understand the discussion on gender interaction. Okay. Is it permissible for a man and lady to interact?
Yes.
Okay. Think about my question.
It depends on the interaction.
Not that much, not that far. We'll get there.
I meant like it could be like open.
You're getting sophisticated from it. Let's just make it very easy, very simple. A guy and girl pass each other. Should they say salam to each other?
Yes.
Those who say yes, raise your hand. Those who say no, raise your hand. Yeah, that's my guy right there. Hardcore. I like it. I like it. Okay. Is it okay for a guy and girl to greet each other, or to talk to each other, or to sit down and socialize with each other? This is a very important question. I can broaden the discussion, right? If there's a lady standing at Walmart behind the teller, and a guy is checking out, does he need to look for a male behind the teller or not? Are you guys with me? Yes or no?
No.
Yes.
Are you guys following my question? Yes or no? Yes, you are. Okay. The question here is that, is it permissible for men and women to interact? That's the fundamental question. Now, the principal answer is that yes, it is permissible for them to interact. It is permissible for them to interact. However, not openly without any restrictions. Islam has put certain conditions down. Islam has put down guidelines on interaction between the opposite genders. Now this is something that you need to be careful of, things you need to be cognizant of. However, interaction is definite. You know, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, did the Prophet of Allah ﷺ interact with women? Yes or no?
Yes.
Did they interact with him?
Yes.
Did the men and women buy and sell from each other in the markets?
Yes.
Yes. If there was a dinner, would the man invite women over? Yes. If families would go back and forth, people knew each other. It was a very normal society. It was a very natural society. People, they recognize each other. You know, like, there are tons of examples. Yet the Prophet ﷺ put down certain restrictions. So for example, the Prophet ﷺ gave guidelines that never should there be a point in your life where you are absolutely alone in seclusion with someone from the opposite gender who is marriageable. You guys understand that? So, do not be alone. لا يخلون رجل بامرأة. The Prophet ﷺ said, a man should never be alone with another lady. Because if they are two alone, the third will be? You guys have all heard the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ gives us guidelines. Okay? Similarly, when you're looking at someone from the opposite gender, is it permissible for someone to look at another person from the opposite gender? Yes or no? First glance. Make that one very long glance. Okay? Is it permissible for a person to look at another person from the opposite gender? Again, we look at this from the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, when he talked, okay, let's look at the ayah itself very quickly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He says, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. Tell the believing men to lower from their gaze. What's the key word in that sentence? Raise your hand.
Lower.
Raise your hand, guys. There's a reason behind that. Okay, sister with the blue cardigan.
Lower.
Lower. Anyone else want to help me with the key word? Yes.
Men.
Men, very good. From. The key word in that sentence. Tell the believing men to lower from their gaze. What's one of the most important words in that sentence? From. The from there in that sentence is very important. Why so? I'll give you an example. Let's say, for example, I was to say to one of the guys in the gathering, one of the sisters in the gathering, that I want you to read Harry Potter. What does that mean? It's not a trick question, trust me. If I said to you, read Harry Potter, what does that mean? Read the full book. If I said to you, read from Harry Potter, what would you say then? What part of it? What page? What part of it do you want me to read? When you use the min in Arabic, min lit-tab'id. Min is for denoting a portion of something. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't say lower your gaze non-stop. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says lower your gaze from. And when the scholars, when they discuss this idea from, what is Allah telling us to lower our gaze from? So the scholars, they discuss this in great detail, and they say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does not want men looking at women lustfully. So if they're discussing and talking to one another, that's okay. But as soon as it turns lustful, or if a lady's looking at a guy, right? A girl's looking at a guy, and they're just talking, they're just looking at each other. Right now, we're looking at each other. If at any point in this gathering, for anyone in this gathering, this becomes lustful, and I know I'm going to throw a curveball at you, but please don't laugh for a second, okay? And I mean this. Even if a guy looks at a girl, or a girl looks at a guy, or you look at someone from the same gender, you guys understand what I'm saying? Okay? The idea here is that whenever a gaze turns lustful, then what do you need to do? You need to lower it. That's where you need to start lowering your gaze. So, may Allah protect, but this is the reality in our community. There are many young men and women who are being trialed with this. They're being trialed with temptation from the same gender. So, it's not like because the Quran doesn't mention the same gender, you're supposed to continue looking. If that's your struggle in life, then I understand that, I appreciate it. It is a reality. You know, as being an imam in the community, in Chicago itself, you know, I deal with these cases all the time. You know, people coming and saying that I have homosexual tendencies within my community. And then throughout the country, nationally, it's a big issue. So whenever your temptations come in, that's where you need to go down and lower your gaze. Can anyone ever tell you whether you're tempted or not, or whether that temptation is there? Can I assume that you're looking at me with temptation, or I'm looking at you with temptation? Yes or no?
No.
It's something it's internal. That's where you have to remember that Allah is watching you. That's where you need to remember and remind yourself that I can maybe fool people, but Allah is aware. That's why in the Quran Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of the خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ, the deceptive eye, right, which is going around cheating, the mischievous eye. وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ, and Allah knows of what's inside your heart as well. So maybe the people you can make it sound like it's nothing there, but if something is there, Allah is aware of it. That's where you need to now go and lower your gaze down. That's where the men and women, this is where the ayah fits in. So interaction between the opposite gender, you have to realize that for anyone in this gathering to think that you can go through the years of college without interacting with someone from the opposite gender at all, it's going to be very hard for you. It's possible, definitely possible, but it's going to be hard for you. Legally, you have to understand from the Islamic standpoint, you need to make sure that you cut out temptation. You need to keep yourself in check. Remind yourself again and again that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching you. And if at any point during a MSA meeting or maybe an iftar, the MSA iftar, at any point if you feel temptation does kick in, that's where you now need to hold yourself to the commandment of Allah and start lowering your gaze. If someone comes to me and says to me, I will not interact with someone from the opposite gender at all on campus, I will say, Walillahi alhamd. That's awesome. Thumbs up. You understand? I mean, that's the type of guy I was when I went to college, to be honest with you. I didn't interact with people from the opposite gender at all. The reason was because I felt, and I still believe this till today, college campuses are they're just nuts. Nuts meaning what? People's hormones are just going wild. Like every time I come to a college event, and I'm sure this is going to happen on the way out, so if you have this issue, please don't stop. You can come bring it to me anyway, okay? Every time I come to a campus, what's one question I always will be trialed with? Very good, mashallah. Right? Sheikh, I've been on campus for 2 days right now. College started 2 days ago. And there's this guy who's very pious. How do you know he's pious? He prays 5 times salah. That's the definition of taqwa these days, you know? Someone who prays 5 times salah. And then, Sheikh, I'm really considering it. This is very serious for me, and I'm thinking about it, okay? Okay, cool. Sister, I'll give you some guidance. This is my email. Email me. We'll sit together, we'll talk, and we'll figure this out, inshallah, okay? Now, 2 weeks later, she doesn't email me. I end up coming back to that college again. What happened? Well, I realized that he wasn't for me, but I have someone else now. It's kind of like trying on, a shirt or something. You just try one out, it doesn't look good, figure that one out. So people's emotions all over the place. Every time you meet someone at college, when you're at this age in particular, what are you thinking? Well, the first question that comes to your mind is, niqabul or no niqabul? No niqabul, okay, forget it. Niqabul, let's talk now. So, it's very common. I realize this, that guys on college campuses and sisters on college campuses, when they greet each other, there's no smile. From the opposite gender, as soon as they greet each other, what comes with it? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. How are you doing? How's everything going? Oh, mashallah, I haven't seen you in so long. His buddy's like, I was sick, you didn't ask me that. Right? So this is the age in your life, and believe it or not, your parents went through this phase too. When your parents were your age, this is what was going through their mind 24/7. You guys understand? They were just thinking, nikah, 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 and they told their parents that mom and dad, I have to get married, and mom and dad said, not yet, finish up your college. So this is the phase in your life where, and this is natural, where your carnal passion is really kicking in. So at this phase in your life in particular, this is where it's very important that you keep yourself on check. You don't realize it, that every person has a unique challenge in life. Okay? And these challenges differ from phase of life to phase of life. So for example, you go to a 6-year-old kid, and you tell him, you can't date a girl. What is he going to say? No problem, I want you to do that. Right? If you tell him you can't kiss a girl, what's he going to say? Ew! That's disgusting. Why would a guy kiss a girl? Yes or no? That's right? But you tell that same 6-year-old kid. Today, right now, before I came here, I stopped over at my house. My kids had candy. I said to them that you can't eat candy until you have chawal first. And my kids said, no, I'm going to eat candy. Both of them. They teamed up against me. So I went to their hands and I pulled the candy out. Allahu Akbar, they started crying. Right? Because their biggest challenge right now at this age is what? Candy. They can't imagine living a life without candy. I said to them, no candy for 1 week. They fell down. It's like me telling one of you guys here, you will never get married for the rest of your life. Some of you guys are like, whoa, why did he even say that? Why would he say that? You see how you're offended right now? And that example itself was so painful? Everyone has a different temptation in life. If you were to go to someone older, I was like saying, when you're young, lying is a challenge. When you're young, eating candy is a challenge. When you're young, video games. I always tell everyone this. When I was young, my biggest challenge in life was video games. I could never imagine a day without video games. If you came to me when I was 9 years old and you said that a day is going to come in your life where you won't play video games at all, I would think to myself, Ya Allah, give me death on that day. I couldn't imagine it. Right? That was my temptation. That was my challenge in life. My father came and told me, Hussain, you're never going to become anything in life. You're going to be a scum, right? Until you stop playing games. And I said, Dad, if that's what's written for me, that's what's written for me. I'm not stop playing games, right? That was a temptation. People grow up older, they reach a phase in their life when they hit their teens, they reach maturity, their hormones will start going crazy, and then this is the new phase in life, where now it's all about that gender interaction. What's the balance, what's not the balance? Because everything I said to you right now, you have to bear in mind, it was all undertoned with shahwa, with carnal passion. So is it permissible for a person to speak with someone from the opposite gender? It comes down to carnal passion. You understand? Is there passion there or not? Until the point where the fuqaha have gone as far as saying that, is it permissible for a man to say salam to a lady? They say that if he is sincerely saying salam as a dua, no problem at all. But if he's saying salam with an ill intention in his heart, then that salam should be avoided as well. Is that crazy? The Hanafi fuqaha have actually written this. Not only the Hanafi, many scholars have written this. That if it comes to a point where when you're saying salam, you have something ill in your heart, you're doing it to attract attention, you're doing it to start a conversation that will be inappropriate, or that you hope will be inappropriate, that's where even that salam needs to go. You guys understand that? So this is something that's very sensitive. The whole discussion is undertoned by shahwa, by carnal passion. Does it exist or not? So for me to assume that an old uncle and an old auntie, when they're saying salam to each other, is there carnal passion there? Probably not. Like when I was in Dallas a few weeks back. Actually, it's been a few months now. I'm going there tomorrow morning again. So I was there a few months back, and I gave a lecture at the Plano Masjid. After I gave the lecture, the Jummah khutbah there, a lady, she called me. She said to me, Sheikh, my son was at your lecture. He enjoyed it. My son's wife, daughter-in-law, she was at your lecture. She also enjoyed it. My grandkids were there. They enjoyed it. But unfortunately, I couldn't make it because of a handicap. Can you come visit me? So I said to her, look, Auntie, I'm going to try. I'm really busy. I have a lot of stuff going on. My schedule is usually booked by the hour, not by the day. So I have so much stuff going on. I'm going to try to make it to you. So she said to me, if you don't make it to me, then you're not my son. Aunties are great at blackmail, okay? I don't even know who she is. Right? She says to me, you don't come, to mera beta nahi, you're not my son. I said, Auntie, okay, I will be there. So I found a brother in the masjid. I said, look, I need to go visit this auntie, let's go. We went there, we sat down, and subhanAllah, I kid you not, that auntie, she sat and talked to me for like an hour and a half. And the funny thing was, she was talking about random stuff. Like she was talking about, subhanAllah, like how beautiful she was when she was 20. So old. She was such an old lady. She's sitting there telling me about what she wore on her wedding night, and how she got dressed up, and then her brother got married, and then her sister got married, and I'm sitting to listen to all of it. And it was actually quite interesting, even though it wasn't really religious, but it was just a really cool conversation. I was learning a lot about culture. So at the end of it, I said to her, Auntie, you know what, I gotta head out. I really love your stories. I have to head out. But before I head out, I actually shared with her a lot of poetry. Can I share? Do you guys understand Urdu? Yes. Some of you guys do? Okay. Those of you who do, you'll understand this line, so you'll enjoy it. You'll appreciate it. Those of you who don't, I'll translate it for you. So I said to her, Auntie, you sat here for an hour and a half telling me about your beauty. Can I share with you one line of poetry? She said, go ahead. So I said to her, Chahte hai wo ke makeup se bur ho jaye. The poet is addressing the women. He's saying to them that the women desire that they apply makeup all over themselves and they become like the women of paradise. चाहते हैं वो कि मेकअप से हूर हो जाए, क्या मुमकिन है कि किशमिश दोबारा अंगूर हो जाए? Is it possible to reverse a raisin into a grape again? Once a grape turns into a raisin, so I said this to the auntie. She goes to me, "Tu to bada badmash nikla." She said to me, "You're a scum. You've been sitting all this time listening to my story, and you think of me as a kishmish? You think I'm some raisin?" So we were just having, it was all in good heart, right? So I said, okay, I'm going to head out right now. Assalamu alaikum. So I was getting my shoes on, and then she says to me, "Tu to badtamiz bhi hai. You don't have good manners either." Alright, so I said to her, "Auntie, what did I do now?" Right? So she says, "How could you leave without taking my du'as?" So I said, "Okay, Auntie." I came closer, and culturally that means the auntie's going to put her hand on your head. If she's super cultural, what's she going to do? Crack the knuckles? Right? She didn't crack the knuckles on me. She said to me, she put her hand on my head, she gave me some du'as, and I was leaving. Now, after I left, I got out of the car, I sat down. The brother next to me said, "Sheikh, you let a lady touch you." I looked at him and said, "Bro, what's wrong with you? Are you out of your mind? Like, that lady there is very old." I don't mean this in a bad way, but just to kind of explain the situation, I mean, Allah knows how many days she has left on the world. A very, very old person. So, when we talk about this whole idea of gender interaction, it all comes down to what? It comes down to shahwa, whether lust is there or not, whether that carnal passion is there or not. The Prophet ﷺ, when he dealt with young people in particular, he had a different approach. When he dealt with adults, he had a different approach. For example, the famous hadith in Bukhari, you'll find Fadl bin Abbas radiallahu anhu. I don't even know how long I've spoken for. How long has it been so far? 40 minutes? Okay, we'll wrap up. Okay. I'll share with you guys a narration of Fadl bin Abbas. Fadl bin Abbas radiallahu anhu was the cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was a young kid. The brother of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was performing Hajj, and during Hajj, women do not cover their faces. They're not supposed to. Even if you want to, you can't. You're not supposed to cover your face. No garment is supposed to touch or make contact with your face. So there was this lady who was very beautiful. The narrations describe her as a very beautiful lady. She came to the Prophet ﷺ and she asked a question that, can I do Hajj on behalf of my father? You know the whole idea of Hajj al-Badr? Have you guys heard of that? Where you do Hajj on behalf of someone else, someone that's deceased or someone that's chronically ill that won't be able to perform Hajj, you go on their behalf. So this is the actual foundation of that whole concept. She said, "Afa-ahujju an abi." Can I do Hajj on behalf of my father? So while she was asking this question, while the Prophet was answering her question, Fadl bin Abbas, the Prophet's cousin, was standing on the side and he was looking at her. And he wasn't just looking, he was staring at her. And the Prophet looked once, the kid staring at her. He didn't say anything. He looked again and that kid was staring at her. So what did the Prophet do? Now, this is interesting, okay? What does he do? Does he tell the girl, "Go cover your face and sit in your house, and if you have a question, write it on a piece of paper and send it with the kid to the front of the gathering, I will then write a reply and send it back to you"? Is that what the Prophet's approach is? No. The Prophet respects. The lady has a question, she wants to come and ask, that's your moment. Now, and what does he do? He grabs the face of the kid and turns it away. He said, "You look over there for a minute while I deal with the situation." Okay? You look over there. The Prophet doesn't realize that gaze was inappropriate. Okay? And the Sahabi was a beautiful person. I don't want anyone to walk away from here thinking that the Sahaba were evil people. They were good people, but they were human beings at the same time. And he realized the Sahabi, his gaze was inappropriate. The Prophet takes the young man's face and he turns it away. So that now the situation is diffused and things have calmed down now. You know, it's no longer in a gathering that's wrong or something that's inappropriate. So when we talk about this discussion, we have to be considerate of our age too. I don't want anyone sitting here, thinking that I said that men and women can openly interact, because that's not what I said. What I'm saying to you is the moment you feel as an individual you can control yourself, that's where now there is scope for you to interact with someone from the opposite gender if there's necessity, if there's a need. But if you fear that on yourself, then that's where you need to be careful. And this is a very big issue because this is something where culture and religion clash. There is no distinction between lust or not when we discuss gender interaction culturally. Culturally, lust or not, gender interaction is completely okay. Forget without lust. If there's no lust and you're interacting, there's no point. People want to interact if there is. That's what we do culturally. You know, and the movies that we have out there that are being produced these days and the TV shows, this is what they promote. They're promoting this literally day and night, and this is what's being fed into our minds. So at this age in particular, this is where we need to be extra careful. The Prophet ﷺ, he viewed the issues very differently. So for example, there was a situation where it was the month of Ramadan, and a Sahabi came and asked the Messenger of Allah, "While I'm fasting, can I kiss my wife?" The Prophet said, "No." A little while later, another guy comes and asks, "O Messenger of Allah, can I kiss my wife?" The Prophet says, "Yes." So the Sahabi that was sitting there, he saw a contradiction. He said, "O Messenger of Allah, a little while ago, someone has asked you if you can kiss his wife, and you said no." Then in that same gathering, same day, same time, a little while later, another guy comes and asks you, "Can I kiss my wife?" and you said yes. So there's a contradiction there. Why? The Prophet ﷺ said, he was a young guy, he was an old guy. A young man kissing his wife, we fear that it may escalate from there and they may end up doing something that will break their fast. An old man, if he kisses his wife, walillahi alhamd, takbir. You understand? I mean, where do you find an old man kissing his wife? If he's going to do it while they're fasting, walillahi alhamd. All praises for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't fear anything beyond that as well. Okay? That's where you have to contextualize the hukum. So, I know we started off, and the discussion is very open. Right now, I started off the discussion in a very wide scope. We started off, I want to wrap things up before I end. I started off by talking about how identity is not something that's only external. The external it's in there in the religion, don't get me wrong. There are so many narrations that emphasize the importance of external identity, establishing your identity externally as well. But that external identity is there to complement your internal identity. Right? And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu aminu. All those who believe, believe. Interesting verse, right? It's redundant. It's like me saying, those who are sitting, sit down. Allah saying, those who believe, believe. So the scholars, when they discuss this ayah, they say, those who have believed externally, meaning their actions and statements are there, how about now bringing belief into your heart? Right? And identity starts at that heart. Okay? People, when they understand, in order to understand identity, you're going to have to understand that one of the things that's going to be the biggest challenge for you to establish your identity is going to be your culture. And that's why I was discussing the four different types of people when it comes to them in relation to their culture. There are those who, them and their relationship to their religion. There are those who view religion from the scope of their personal desires. There are those who view religion from the scope of culture. And I stopped right there. And I'll just share the other two with you so that way next week we're going to have to cover them. There are those who view religion from halal and haram. What's halal I will do, what's haram I'll stay away from. That's it. Nothing more than that. And then there are those who view religion from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So their relation isn't only with what's fard and what's haram. They want to dwell further into that, and they want to understand even more of, what is Islam? What does Islam want from me completely? And once you understand the balance between culture and religion, this will truly help you in understanding your identity as a Muslim. We're sitting here as Muslims, but most of us, if not all of us, are also sitting here as Americans. Yes or no? And whenever someone brings up the word American Muslim, especially from the culture that we come from, most of us, first generation here, or second generation here, it's something that's very scary. We don't like the word American Muslim. Is that right or wrong? As soon as someone says American Muslim, we think to ourselves, this is going to be something very fishy, something very weird, because we think of America and Islam having a beef with each other. Politically, our international policy is different. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the values. Yes, there are certain values in the culture, in this culture, that contradict our religion, as with all cultures. Which culture is absolutely Islamic? Very difficult. Even you go to Muslim countries, do you think their cultures match Islam? Yes or no? No, I'm telling you. My aunt, I'm not going to say which country she's from, right? My aunt was telling me that there was someone that she knows who got robbed. Someone robbed her, and not only did they rob her, she was at home alone. They came and put a gun to her, right? And they said to her, "Where's her gold?" She said, "It's upstairs." They said, "We're going to go take all the gold out. When we're leaving, have tea ready for us." She had to make tea for the robbers. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Right? I mean, when I look at this, I think to myself, is this a Muslim country or not? What kind of values do you have? Okay, we have, someone can say that can happen in America. Yes, it could happen in America. The point that I'm making is that every culture or every country has its good or bad. Every society has its good or bad. Believe it or not, this buddy here, I met some brother on the way in, he was telling me he's from Jeddah, mashallah. Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, when you think of Saudi Arabia, what comes to your mind? Prayer, mashallah. God. Anyone else? Tobes, right? The Ghuntura. What else comes to your mind?
Camels.
Camels. Right? Tall buildings. Before that, no, but now it's like tall buildings come to your mind. I was in Medina Munawwara, and interesting story. I was in Medina Munawwara a few years back, And I had a business meeting. I have a clothing line, so there was a person there who I had a business meeting with. I was going for the business meeting, and this young guy was driving the cab. We got stuck in traffic. So while we were sitting in traffic, my brother said to me, Hussain, my brother, many of you guys know him, Sheikh Mubin, he's an imam here too. So my brother said to me, Hussain, why don't you talk with this guy? So I said, no, you know what, I really don't want to. And the reason why my brother said talk to him was because this guy was picking up his phone every 30 seconds for a minute and smiling at the screen and putting it back in his pocket. Now, my brother and I are both imams and we deal with youth a lot. And if someone's checking their phone every 30 seconds and they're smiling, what does that mean? Thank you. There's a girl texting me. You understand? So I said to him, you know what, I'm not interested right now, let's just leave it, okay? So he said to me, no, just go ahead. You're in Medina Munawwara, you'll get a reward for doing some dawah here too. I said, man, I do this all year, I'm tired now. I just want to relax, be in Medina, enjoy the moment. He said, no, do it. So we're sitting in traffic, I said, okay. So I asked him, Masmuk, what's your name, my dear friend? He said to me, his name was so-and-so. We started a conversation. So I said to him, who's the girl? So he said, Wallahi! Right? He said, I swear by Allah, it's no girl. So I said, come on, bro. He's like, I'm from America. I'm from Shaitan. You've adopted Shaitan. The fitna started from my backyard. We experience them first. You guys get the second hand, right? So, please, honestly. He goes to me, Sheikh, I promise, and he shows me it, and the caller ID says Samir. I said, I told you, we are the founders of the fitna. I mean, who does, I hope you guys don't do this. But Samir, and it's actually supposed to be Samira. Right? So I said, bro, I know that contact with the wrong name. If it's the contact with the right name, I have a bigger concern for you. So he said, no, Sheikh, you know what, okay, I'll just tell you right now. I met this girl, and he's telling me this whole love story. The kid is 16 years old and driving a cab. That was my biggest fear, okay? And now he's getting all emotional while he's driving a cab. I'm even more worried. So then I asked him, do you have a masjid nearby? He said, Nafs al-Shari. On the exact same street, there's a masjid. I said, Masmul Imam. What's the name of the Imam there? He said, Sheikh. If someone tells you their Imam's name is Sheikh, what does that mean? They don't know their Imam. You understand? And if they don't know their Imam, the chances are they don't have a spiritual guide. And if they don't have a spiritual guide, that means they have spiritual loss. And the more I went into it and I talked to this young man, honestly, when I left that cab, my heart was broken. I thought to myself, subhanAllah, I traveled a country in the US teaching people Islam, and the city of the Prophet ﷺ, the youth there are struggling. I mean, it's a reality. The youth of the Prophet's city, they're struggling. So, every culture has good and bad. Every culture has good and bad. It's about you learning to balance between the good and the bad of your culture. And the moment you can find that right balance, that's where, inshallah, you will truly understand what your identity means. If I tell you what your identity is from an Islamic view only, it may be impractical for you to implement living in the West. But if I tell you your identity as an American only, it may not allow you to reach Jannah in the hereafter. That's why it's important that when we view identity, we understand it from both standpoints. Okay? And I'll discuss this with more detail, inshallah. I'll take it on from there on Tuesday. And the second thing that I'm going to discuss on Tuesday, inshallah, is further going on discussing the idea of identity establishing itself internally first. That internal development, inshallah. So I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts from sallallahu ta'ala wa sallam. Are we doing Q&A? Are we doing Q&A?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to sit right here. My legs are ready.
Thank you for that very informative and beautiful lecture. So do we have any questions for Mufti and Kamani? If not,
one second, sorry. I know there's a camera there and you guys are recording. No one told me you guys were recording. I don't mind recording generally, but if there's going to be recording, I have to be plugged. I was a little unplugged right now. So there were certain things that I said that were kind of I'm just saying it because the crowd was young and I was just sharing things with you guys. I prefer that if you have any recordings, don't share them on to the world. Because people won't understand what I'm saying. You guys understand that? So if I'm sitting here cracking jokes with you guys, talking with you, I'm not talking to the youth in Pakistan or India. If I was talking to them, my discussion would be very different. And that's one of the biggest issues that happens, that discussions are quoted out of context, and then when they go to the rest of the world, people think that it's silly. Are you guys following what I'm saying? If I was sitting in front of a group of young guys and girls who were all wearing hijab and wearing niqab and wearing a turban, would I tell them to even interact with each other casually? I wouldn't. You guys understand that? Are you guys following what I'm saying? If in front of me was a crowd of conservatives, would I even give them any leeway in interaction? I would say it's better that you try to avoid it as much as possible. Like I gave my own example. When I was young, I avoided it. But I'm not speaking with that crowd. I'm speaking with a different crowd here. So you have to be aware of the crowd, the audience, and also the speaker whenever you share information. Okay? So usually if I'm giving a lecture and someone tells me beforehand that they're going to be recording, they're at loss. The reason is because I won't be unplugged. I'm going to be very careful making sure that I'm politically correct throughout the lecture so anyone that listens to it won't have objections and they'll understand the message. So if you have recorded it, I'm not saying delete it, you can keep it, but just don't let it leave this room or this gathering of people. If you want to share it with the MSA listserv, not a problem at all, but not for the rest of the world, inshallah. Exactly.
So are there any questions tonight?
So I know you mentioned this is like really minor part of your talk. You mentioned how like most of us might not go through the same struggle with other people. But what happens when your friend goes through a struggle, like depression, being in a relationship, or like drinking or anything? How do you deal with that? Like it's really hard for me to have friends like that and then be able to like console them because I have no idea how to talk to them.
So you're saying that there's a friend of yours, someone that you know, hypothetically,
Yeah.
who may have a struggle.
Yeah.
And that struggle is so serious that you want to help them, but you don't know how to help them.
Yeah.
It happens. How do you deal with it? The best thing for you to do is to get them in touch with someone who can help them and who has professional experience. That's the best thing. You can try to help them, but the chances are that you may end up helping them or you may end up hurting them even more. Okay? It's always best to send them to someone who can help them. That would be my simple answer to you. And the thing of living in Chicago, I mean, you guys are here in Loyola, we're in Chicago, there are many options, many avenues. I was just told on the way here that you guys actually have a chaplain.
Yes.
Is that right? You guys all know that, right? Making sure everybody knows. Okay. Professor Umar Muzaffar is now the official chaplain. If he's the chaplain for the Muslims, I mean, Ustad Umar Muzaffar is my student, and I've taught him for, over a year. You know, we studied like almost 12 hours a day together. He came every single day, and we studied and studied and studied. And he's a great student. I'm proud to say that Allah gave me the opportunity to teach him. He's a very brilliant, intelligent young man. He's young, yeah. You guys are all thinking about that sweater, right? I'm going to have to let him know that we talked about him in this gathering. So send them to someone who can help them, inshallah.
But what if you interact with them on a normal basis? Like how do you deal, because they're so distraught by their problem. Like how do you deal with that? Like when you're like interacting with them. I know you're supposed to be compassionate.
The issue is here that when you're interacting with someone who is challenged, whatever, maybe a spiritual challenge or physical, whatever it is, you have to ask yourself this question. Let's talk about spiritual for a second, okay? Let's say, for example, someone has a habit of gambling. Okay. Should you be that person's friend or not? That's a question.
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Those who say no, raise your hand. Should you be the friend of a person who gambles?
Yeah.
No. Who says you shouldn't be friends? Anyone here?
I think I would say no if it influences you.
Okay. Who says you should be friends with that person? The rest of you guys don't have an opinion? Come on, guys, keep me open. I told you this is an unplugged gathering. No one's going to judge you. Yes, sister, why? Why should you be?
Because you could argue that they could influence you, but what if you influence them?
Okay. Good argument, yes, no? You can influence, yes.
I think it's who's the majority in the group. Because there's a cliff analogy, and there's like three people. If there's three people that gamble, and you're the only one that doesn't, there's more likely that you're going to fall off the cliff and not be able to help. Or they're going to fall off the cliff.
So how do the three become, how does the equation flip over then?
Well,
Mathematically.
if you have the gambler, you can introduce him to your friends, and three people can save one person off the cliff. Because the influence.
So you'd have to build another crew and come back.
Yeah, because like if you have a group of friends, but I'm saying you have a group of friends and you're all praying and he's not, he's gonna feel salty. Like, why am I not praying? And he's gonna make no praise. So I think it's always the.
You ever heard of Mario Puzo?
No.
The guy who wrote the Godfather?
No.
Oh, you guys read novels? He writes a lot about this whole mafia culture, where you build numbers on the side and one of the greatest number wins. It's an interesting approach. So the principle, I'll teach you guys a principle, okay? Then you guys can do the fill in yourself. The principle is دَفْعُ الْمُضَرَّ أَوْلَى مِنْ جَلْبِ الْمَنْفَعَةِ. That's the principle, okay? What does that mean? To push away harm is more important than bringing good. Can you guys understand that? Is it settling in? This is a principle in the deen. To push away harm is more important than bringing good. So let's say, for example, I said to you, or you had a challenge in your own life, okay? Should I smoke weed or pray 2 rakat tahajjud? Which one's more important? Let's say you had to choose between one of the two. Would you pray the tahajjud and smoke weed, or would you not smoke weed and not pray tahajjud? You guys understand what I'm saying? To push away harm is more important than bringing good. And the example is if your bowl is dirty, your milk is also going to be dirty. You need to clean the bowl, and then that's why as Muslims, before we say we believe in Allah, what do we do first? Before you say you believe in Allah, what comes first? Ghusl. That's sunnah, but it's not necessary. Okay, what's the kalima? La ilaha first. Illallah second. La ilaha first. What does that mean? No God. Negation. Push away the evil. Illallah, now Allah comes to me. Except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You understand? So negation comes first. Affirmation comes second. So the principle is that pushing away evil is more important than bringing good. Now, how does this principle fit into our example? You answered it at the beginning correctly. Okay? The issue is that you need to make a conclusion. You need to ask yourself that do you think you will be influenced or you will influence? That's a question you have to make. You have to assess it. Will I be influenced or can I influence them? Now I understand in your example you said 3 on 1 and you're looking at probability here. The probability of 3 influencing 1 is greater, but at the same time 1 can also influence 3 million. Is that possible? The Prophet ﷺ is a beautiful example. One man who knew that he wasn't going to get influenced. He trusted himself, he trusted Allah, he made dua to Allah, and he took on the world. So yes, it all comes down to whether you think you will be influenced or whether you can influence. If you feel you're going to be influenced, run the other way. Go the other way, run to safe haven, protect yourself, and stay away. And at college, this is a very cool thing, very beautiful thing you brought up. This is a big issue from this perspective, where you're meeting new people, new friends. Sometimes college friends could be good friends, or sometimes they could be the worst friends. These could be people who will make you do things that you can never, ever even imagine. I know many guys and girls who 3-4 months into college, they reach out to me and they say, Sheikh, I've done things in my life that I thought I would never do. I never thought I would go this far, and I've gone that far. And I ask them, what took you there? They'll say, college. The people that I met, the people that I was with, I was trying to fit in. There was no one. These are the people that I met. These are the people that I dorm with, and they pushed me that far. To be honest with you, when I look at myself, I think that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wherever I am today, obviously I owe it to my parents and my teachers and their du'as and all the other stuff, but the people that I was with also influenced me a lot. You understand? The buddies that I was with, I had a buddy who was my roommate. We were roommates for the longest time, for years. He was from Medina Munawwara. I learned spoken Arabic from him, because he used to only speak Arabic, right? I started off by saying aywa, 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 right? Which is not even proper Arabic. It's, it's slang, right? It's not classical. And when I say proper, I mean classical, okay? Because to us, the Arabic language helps us understand the Quran. So it helps us understand the Quran is proper, but doesn't help us understand the Quran is local language. So that's the principle. Allahu A'lam, Allahu A'lam. Yes. Someone have a question here? Yes.
It was kind of like a continuation. So what if no one's influencing anyone?
Stand still?
Yeah.
You could be friends then, yeah. You could be friends. Your friendship doesn't always mean you have to convert someone.
But going off of Ahad's question.
I understand.
Someone is doing something you're
I understand.
about.
That's what I mean. The thing that I said is that that's in a situation. The principle I said there was in a scenario where it's either or. But if neither exists, can I be a friend of a non-Muslim? Of course I can be a friend. As long as they're not influencing me and I'm not influencing them. We're just there and we're friends because of a common hobby maybe. Maybe we like to play basketball, maybe we like studying together. That's completely okay. A standstill is okay if you want to look at it from that way, where you're on neutral grounds. It becomes dangerous when you go into negative grounds. You understand? And that's what the Quran says, when being friends with the Jews and the Christians. It says that you will assimilate them. You understand? Where then you come to their grounds. And then while you're assimilating them, it's possible that you may lose your own principles and your own values and then be in a place where you will regret. That's where the context of those verses is. Allah. Yes?
I have just a question about if in the Islam you said you can't get women for women. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. This
There are
question-
some discussions that you don't
actually-
even use as an example. You know, I call them buzzwords. Okay.
Actually, many people they ask me about this because I'm from Saudi, so it happened a lot. So I don't know what I respond to them.
Okay, let's discuss this next week. Is that okay?
Okay. No,
Okay. Will you remember it, inshallah? I'm going to be here on Tuesday, 3-4 days later. We'll sit down, we'll talk, and we'll spend some time on it,
Next
inshallah.
week,
Tuesday,
Tuesday.
in 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, same time.
Yeah, so we had another lecture then. The reason is because it's a more lengthier answer.
It's long,
And
yeah.
I want to give it justice. Look, we don't cop out of any discussion. I don't believe in that, okay? If someone asks a question, you address it head on, no problem at all. If people understand it, alhamdulillah. If they don't, it is what it is. So we'll sit down and discuss it. That's not an issue. The only thing is that I have a flight tomorrow morning. I have to be at the airport at 4 a.m. So I want to hopefully wrap this up quickly and get home and get some rest. You got a question?
What's the al-hukum in this point? What?
Oh my God.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I completely understand what you're saying. Okay, so you ask. Here's the thing: when you share an answer, it's always good to give an explanation. The reason is because you don't want anyone to have an answer without an explanation, because that will leave the door open to further doubt. You understand that? So that's why I prefer not to answer it right now.
Okay.
So we'll explain it then, inshallah, on Aziz.
Okay.
I'm so tempted to do it. I'm so tempted. My tongue is like saying answer it, but I'm not going to. I'm trying to hold myself back. Is that okay?
Keep it. It's okay.
Okay. Any other question? Like a short, something short? Yes, go ahead.
This is really random. I mean, someone else can go from.
There's another sister, but I'll let you go first. Go ahead.
It's just like, you know how you mentioned the shaitan thing when you close the musalla? How did that even come about? Like, I never understand that. Like, that thing, like that cultural, like when you close the musalla, when you open it.
How they came up with the shaitan idea?
Yeah, like why and how?
You know it's funny. You know why it's funny is because we laugh at them because we think their culture is silly, and they laugh at us. The laugh is both ways, okay? And those who follow us, when they look back at us, they're gonna laugh at us. You know that? I mean, there's gonna be so many things about us. You know, if you take a picture of yourself right now and give it to your great-grandkids, they're gonna think you look like a clown. I'm telling you, that's a reality. Do you not believe that? I kid you not. When I look at my dad's picture and I say, Dad, what's wrong with you? How are you dressed like this in a safari suit? But that was the in thing, okay? So, someone laughed, that's why I kind of brought that up. What was your question again?
I guess you answered it, because I guess that was it might have been due to the time period.
Yeah, it was about the shaitan thing. Yeah, I don't know. Like, honestly, I don't know. I mean, probably someone came up with it. There's like a bunch of things. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Someone has a question at the back? Yes, a question.
What were the three things you mentioned in the beginning on Ibadah?
Muhabba, ma'rifah, and ibadah. Ibadah means worship. It must be preceded by love, which should be preceded by recognition. Recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the core of your identity. That's going to be my next week's talk, inshallah. Next week's talk is actually going to be on that idea of ma'rifah. I'm going to talk about how to recognize Allah, and that should be the core of your identity, and then build the rest of it around there, inshallah. Okay? Yes? We'll make this the last one. Go ahead.
This might be a long question, but it's okay if you answer it next week or whatever. So you talked about how religion and culture clash sometimes. What about when religion and academics clash? Or to put it simply, something like faith and evidence-based science clash. So in religion, a big part of religion is faith, right? And as college students, we're always taught about if it doesn't have any evidence, it's not true, something like that. And I see a lot of people being sort of misguided, well, not misguided, but confused by this.
Oh, I love this question so much. You know what? We're just going to scrap next week's talk and talk about this.
So
really good question.
So I saw that.
Okay, I'm just going to say one thing.
Right.
You know how people say that one of the big things behind Iman is faith, as Muslims, faith, and we scrap our intellect or rationalizing things. That's a big hoax. It's not true.
Yeah.
And there's a balance between both. Maybe we'll have to discuss that. Tomorrow, I would appreciate if you come next week and ask this question again. Okay? And inshallah, if you can come as well, and you can ask your question again. If you're not going to make it, maybe you can write it up and give it to the moderator or to someone here. They'll ask the question on behalf of you guys, and then inshallah we'll address it. Is that cool, everyone?
Yep.
Okay. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay.
Everybody, just so you guys know, part 2 of the lecture series will be next Tuesday at the same time. We will lead a prayer martyr and then continue with part 2. So bring any questions that you have then. And also tomorrow is the MSA Welcome Back Dinner in Damon MPR, 6 p.m. Miriam, Amir, and you will be speaking, so please join us.
I was like asking
You already provided another customer.